done with Dragon Age
So
veilguard.
I
Let's see
am
what he says. If he says this game is good, I'm just gonna lose my mind.
officially done with Dragon Age the Veilguard, both literally and metaphorically, because I have been playing through it for the last whatever week and a half, 2 weeks, and I have rolled credits numerous times.
What's your
I
opinion
have
on?
different choices, different endings. I have tried different romances, companion quests, all of the stuff, and I am left feeling very, very underwhelmed, frankly, and also a little bit misled, which makes me angry. To put it really simply, I feel as though Dragon Age the Veilguard was sold on the premise that it was a big epic fantasy RPG, you know, kind of like Dragon Age, that franchise. Perhaps it's unfair of me, but I thought that that's what this game was going to be, and having gone to a preview event where I played 7 hours of the game back in early September, I felt as though that's what this game was presented as. It was pretty clear that they were saying this was going to be that big epic fantasy RPG, and it just frankly isn't. Instead, it plays much more like a friendship simulator and a group therapy visual novel mixed with a high production fantasy action game. Problem being, none of those are an RPG, and Dragon Age the Veilguard doesn't excel particularly at any one of those 3 components. It's not a very good friendship simulator, it's not a very good group therapy visual novel, and it also is really lacking when it comes to the action side of it, with terrible enemy variety and combat that can grow quite stale as it goes on. And while the first maybe 10 hours of the game feel quite interesting and it feels like it really is this epic fantasy RPG, the more you go on and the deeper you get into the game, the more you realize that that is purely relegated to the first chunk of the game, and then the last several chunks of the game are just about pursuing these companion quest lines, some of which are pretty good, others that are really bland and lackluster. And that's of course built upon the premise that you like the companions with whom you are completing this quest. And that is an assumption I don't think you can make here. And that's because some of the companions are fine or even likable, especially after you get through their storylines. Others are extremely annoying. One is even a full-on spoiled brat who I would not have tolerated spending time with even in like middle school. They're so obnoxious and spoiled. Like it's crazy to me that anybody thought that this character would be likable or interesting, but don't worry, we'll get into that. To put it simply, Dragon Age the Veilguard is extremely disappointing because it doesn't actually deliver on what was promised. And what it does deliver to the player, it doesn't do particularly well either. Don't get me wrong, there are some things that are really impressive. The game is extremely polished, which I do think deserves some credit in the modern day when PC ports are typically atrocious. So I think it gets kudos for that. I do think it is very pretty. It does have an interesting and unique art style. You don't have to like it, but I do think it executes upon it very, very well. I think the hair simulation and character creator is also very impressive, save for the complete lack of butt customization. Like, I hate to be this guy, I don't have a Katunkus, okay? I don't. It's flat as a board, but even my keister is bigger and more bulbous than whatever the max slider is in Dragon Age the Veilguard. Like, seriously, look at this. It's hilarious. Like, seriously, look at this. That's the slider for your butt. Like, what happened to inclusion, man? It's so I know it's like really dumb to bring this up as like a point in a sort of review video, but when I saw that at the preview event first and then they didn't fix it for the final launch, I was like, really? Like we're gonna add in like all these very specific things like for skin conditions or for very particular hairstyles, whatever, that's cool. But just something as simple as having a slider to make the butt a little more plumpy, that's over the line. That's objectifying.
Oh, what about boobs?
Like,
goddamn, you are flat as a board in this game. Everybody is like that.
Maybe. Anyway, I don't know what that diatribe was, but I mean, the point of all of this is just to say that Dragon Age Veilguard I find very disappointing, and in this video I'm going to go through some details on why I feel that is, and we're going to have a special segment at the end of the video where I bring my wife in and she is going to explain her thoughts. If you don't know, my wife Nikki is a die-hard Dragon Age fan, like old school Dragon Age Origins
Oh,
forever, that kind of hardcore fan.
you're
And
about to see a
I've
mental
let her play
breakdown
this.
for
I've
that.
not shared with her my extensive thoughts. I've let her play all the way through it. She's max leveled. She's gone through everything, done every single quest line, and she has some strong thoughts as well. So if you're interested in her non-gaming YouTuber, just fan of the franchise thoughts, make sure to check that out. And we're going to jump into it right after we say a thank you to our sponsor for this video, Factor. Factor makes stress-free, ready-to-eat meals that are never frozen and delivered straight to your front door with chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals ready for you to eat in as few as 2 minutes. You can choose your meals from a weekly menu of 35 different options, including things like calorie-smart meals, keto-friendly meals, protein-heavy meals, or vegan meals. Not to mention they come in these really nice, clean packages, so if you want to just put them in your lunchbox and bring them to work or to school or wherever you're going, you can do that very, very easily. Pop it in the microwave at your work and you're ready to go. They are awesome. And you can see I have one with me because me and my wife actually eat these for lunch throughout the entire week because they're really good and they keep us strictly in adherence to our caloric goals as well to help tame down the dad bod. So I can't recommend them enough. So if you're interested, check them out at the link in the description box below and you will get 50% off of your first order with free shipping. Check it out today. I obviously can't recommend enough because I actually like eat it and use it almost every day of my life. So I'm a believer. Check them out today. Links below. Okay, bada bing, bada boom. Let's get back into it. Let's talk about things I like. Before we get into all the stuff I don't, let's talk about some positives. Be uplifting, very mindful, and then let's get very demure and just go for it, tearing it apart. Okay? Okay. First things first, I really do think they deserve some credit for the production value here. They really went all out when it came to the cinematics, when it came to the set pieces, big boss fights, and things like that. They did a really good job, and frankly, at the end of the game, there are some of my favorite sequences I've ever seen in a BioWare game, and I won't spoil them in this part of the video because we are not in the spoiler section, but I will just say they involve some seamless integrations between big set pieces, big enemies, and levels that you're exploring and fighting your way through as you approach the finale. It's really, really well done. Graphically, I also think the game is quite impressive. It has a very unique art style that not everybody finds particularly engaging, but I do think it gets the job done. And while it's not photorealistic or anything, I do think so far as it's implemented, they did a good job. And speaking of implementation, they also did a tremendous job with optimization. This game runs buttery smooth, and it
buttery smooth, but it fries your CPU. You know, the fucking thing is insanely CPU heavy.
Is extremely well optimized both on console and PC.
As far as I'm aware.
Was sitting at like 90% all the time. I mainly played it on PC, and I've been thoroughly impressed with all of it all the way through. It's a really good looking game consistently, regardless of which levels you're in, and I've had no problems whatsoever as I've played through it. On my gaming laptop or my big desktop, it's worked great. And again, I think they deserve some credit for that because in 2024, it's amazing to say, but that is not a given anymore. A lot of PC ports launch very, very broken, and they did a really good job here. So I think they get a big old thumbs up for that.
Yeah, it was pretty much, it went surprisingly well. Like, you have no idea how well this game ran. Like, it
another shocking thing that I also have to give them a thumbs up for is the lack of de novo inclusion. That is a DRM that usually is in these types of big games, big budget games for most of the games like EA or Ubisoft. And it is an anti-piracy software that has an effect on performance typically. And it also brings up other things like privacy concerns or concerns if you have an unstable internet connection, stuff like that. And they cut it out of this game and launched it without any of that stuff, because they wanted to be as pro-consumer as they could with it, which I think, again, they deserve some credit for. But amazingly enough, I am already at the end of my list of things that I really like, because
that's exactly my point when I did my review. You can't really say nice things about this game, either for its performance and how well it looks and how well it ran, and then some of the cutscenes are good. That's it. You can't tell, and then it doesn't have de novo. You can't say anything else about this game because everything else is just straight up trash.
The deeper into the game you get, the less
Yeah.
The okay stuff feels okay, and it starts to slip into the bad category. And
Yeah,
it's almost
it's a
like this
bit
is one of
downward
those games that you
spiral.
will like a lot more if you just play 10 hours of it. I really do believe that. I think this is one of those games where the more you play it, the less enthused you will become. It's almost like Assassin's Creed Valhalla
Yeah.
in that sense, where you
Holy fuck, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I quit that game in 2 hours. Not even to consider that game. Like, yeah, Valhalla is just trash. Get Virgin. If you want a better Assassin's Creed,
play it for
get
20
Virgin.
hours, you might give it a thumbs up. You play it for the full like 80, 90 hours that campaign takes you, and you're going to be like,
I mean,
no,
that looks
never
cool.
again. I'm so sick of it. It's like
Not even
Jägermeister.
human?
You drink it in college, and it really makes you feel good for the first few sips, and then you get like a little deeper and a little deeper, and soon you're seeing
And
the
then it
devil
makes you
everywhere
wanna
you
puke.
look, and your eyes are going. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. And then years later, you'll just catch a whiff of Jägermeister and it makes you dry heave. That's kind of what this does to you. The more you play it, the more it's like late stage Jägermeister withdrawal. And it's, it just is a real turn off. I swear to God, I don't have a problem. I'm just I'm trying to make analogies and similes to discuss this, keep it dynamic, but I realize it might just sound like I'm an alcoholic now.
I will bet you he is actually having more fun talking how bad this game is than playing the game.
But to discuss the problems more
See?
specifically, I think a lot of these can be tied up into the game's lack of a clear identity. If you weren't aware, this game started as a single player game.
And this is the funniest part. This game is bad because it has nothing to do with the work whatsoever. It's just straight up a garbage
Back
game.
in like the 2018 era, roughly, and then it transitioned into a multiplayer game shortly after that. And then in the midst of COVID, a new director came in and they changed it around and it became a single player game once again. But a lot of the foundations had been laid for the game to be a multiplayer title in the Frostbite engine. And so they kind of had to build upon that foundation to get this final product. And I think you can really, really tell in the level design and the way that they handle combat and everything else. The whole game is structured like a multiplayer game, but it's not. Levels are extremely tight and narrow. They weave together in a somewhat interesting way at times, but there's usually a load screen between each of those. To demonstrate more clearly what I'm talking about, I'm going to use the greatest tool ever given to mankind. You know what I'm talking about, of course. MS Paint. A typical game like this, they would have maybe one steady quest line with big maps that you can work your way through as you explore to the finale. Think of like God of War 2018 or God of War Ragnarok, where it's pretty seamless, even though there's hidden loading screens as you go through, but it's sort of a seamless thing. And that helps it feel really immersive. It helps you just sit down and play through it without disruptive things constantly. It works really well. That's not what this is. How this game is set up is instead they have individual levels that are broken up. One might be for Tevinter, one might be,
Yeah, it gives you the vibe of you are playing a lobby-based game. Yes, it is. It is a lobby-based
the
game.
Lighthouse. Another one might be for Weishaupt or something like that. But you have all of this broken up, and then the player is going to start at a centralized hub. In this case, it is the Lighthouse, which we'll just say is this blue thing, and you're going to load into each one of these, and then load back, and then load into the next one for the next quest, and then come back, and then load into this one for the next quest, and then come back, and then you'll go all the way to this one, load, and then come back. And then you got to go back to this guy again. So you load over there and then, oh, I've got to go back and then go back over here. And so you just end up loading into a bunch of individualized levels, many of which you will come to know like the back of your hand because they're very, very small and they're reused constantly. For side quests, for companion quest lines, and for main story quest lines, you'll return to the same locations multiple times over. And I think this was because the game, when it was originally being designed and scoped as a multiplayer game, this probably made sense, where each one of these you would load into with a friend, with 1, 2, 3 friends in your party, each playing their own character with their different loadouts and abilities and stuff. And you could work through each of these levels and then go back to the centralized hub where you'd upgrade your stuff and then head back out, loading into either the same level, doing more quest lines there, or into a separate one. And I think that is why the game feels the way that it does. It really does feel as though it's structured like a
This if you compare this game structure to Destiny 2, it's
multiplayer
basically
game, but
the
it's
same.
not. And so
Only difference is you use a gun in that one, and you use a freaking staff in this one.
So
If
it
you're a
just
mage,
feels like
that
a
is.
weird single player game.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work. And I, for one, can't tell you how many times I was frustrated to see that what sounded like an epic quest just took me back to another area I had already been, and in some cases took me through boss encounters or fights I had already seen multiple times over. They tried to inspire exploration through these levels by hiding interesting little pieces of loot or crafting materials in those levels, and then requiring that you have a specific companion in your party in order to burn down a certain barrier or to pull out a rock so you can jump up somewhere. But instead of doing it like the old school Lego Star Wars games where like, ooh, you need someone who can use the dark side of the force. You need a character like that. So you better start the level with that character in your group, and then you can swap to them and perform that ability to get to this loot that's locked behind that wall. Instead of doing it like that, they just gave up on that and let Rook do everything. So after you recruit, say, Harding, she has the ability to pull these rocks out from walls so that you can jump to places you couldn't get to before. But they realized very quickly that players will not always have Harding with them. They might not like Harding, or maybe they just are trying to level up a different companion. And so what are they going to do? Are they going to design all main story quest lines in a way where you never see any companion ability? Well, that's not that much fun. And same thing with exploring levels casually. That's not that much fun to have to run back to a pedestal and swap out party members to go back and open a single door. So they just changed it so Rook can open everything by twirling the little dagger and opening the door. And it makes it, once again, feel like companions are not actual companions. They just check off a box to unlock an ability, and Rook can do everything. Not to mention, all of the gear, loot, cosmetics, everything that you find are pretty lackluster and uninteresting. Most of the good stuff is going to be found during the main quest or be hidden within those main quest levels, especially once you get to the point where you can fully upgrade these items, enchant them with certain power-up abilities, and pair them with different abilities unlocked through the skill trees, which are also not particularly expansive. You'll find yourself not feeling the need to explore levels in any careful or intentional way. You just kind of look around whenever you complete a quest and then move on. And I understand they wanted to do something different than Dragon Age Inquisition, which was perhaps too open-ended, but I feel like this is such a strong pendulum swing the opposite way. They just shouldn't have even bothered pretending as though they had levels to explore, because it's done quite poorly in my opinion. Speaking of things done poorly, the writing is among the worst I've seen in an RPG as of late. The tone is really the core problem here. It swings between very gritty and serious, with entire cities being wiped out and annihilated by the Blight or by
it's so out of place. Like everybody around you is dead and dying. And then in the middle, you're just joking about some
dragons or
random
whatever
bullshit.
else, to sitting around having a tea party 20 minutes later talking about our feelings. It's really frankly bizarre, and they try to hand wave it away a few times where they're like, ooh, we don't know when the gods are going to come back next, so let's just take some time to get to know each other or whatever. But it still feels tonally off. Like, if an entire city burns to the ground close to me and I was involved in that happening, whether I was responsible or just could have done something more to stop it or whatever, it feels weird even a week or two later to be going off and just like casually hanging out with my friends. Like, that just feels like you're an a-hole. You know, it just feels weird. And that's this whole game. All the companion quest lines, the more seriously you take the story, the weirder you feel as you're doing these companion quest lines. It doesn't work. I don't think at least players like me are able to just disconnect and separate ourselves from what just happened. And so you just end up feeling like, should we really be doing this? The whole time you're doing all of the companion quest lines, because none of them feel particularly relevant to the main campaign. Most of them are pretty well isolated, whether you're going off with Harding to go on sort of a journey of self-discovery of her abilities, or if you're pursuing something with Nev, taking down groups in her city and kind of defending the city, assuming that you didn't let it get destroyed, or with Tash, going off with Tash to Tash's mother's place and listening to them bicker back and forth over who should make dinner. You think I'm exaggerating? No, that's actually in the game. Look.
You're late. And you brought a guest.
Tosh invited me.
I will set another plate. She did not tell me you were coming.
I don't smell the Iskop. We always have Iskop on Tuesdays.
I am not yet finished with my studies. I thought you would help me tonight.
And by help, you mean do it all. You haven't even chopped the melons.
You swing axes all day. Do you
Oh,
lack the
God.
strength to chop a few melons?
Yeah. Yeah, like I he just comes off as like super duper spoiled brat energy, and I think you're supposed to be like, yeah, Tash, show your mom who's being stupid. It's so like entitled millennial writing, it just personified and cringy. I don't think I have the strength. So I did not complete all of Tash's quest line because it just was getting to the point for me where I was like, I would not, like, you're so obnoxious. I just can't. It's like Saints Row reboot all over again. It's just like, chill out. Like, I don't know if the people that are writing these characters think that younger people talk this way to their parents or to their friends or family or whatever. I don't know if this is supposed to be like, slay. I really don't know. Or if it's written where Tash is supposed to come off super obnoxious. I honestly don't know. All I know is that I find Tash like really obnoxious and unlikable. So I didn't want to pursue any more of the quest lines related to Tash. So I just mentally checked out. But the problem is when your game is basically half companion quest lines, if those companions aren't compelling, you have a real problem on your hands. And unfortunately, most of the quest lines related to the companions fall really flat. They come off really, really bland. The romances that are tied to them, which has previously been a staple of BioWare games, also fall incredibly flat. I won't spoil them, though there's not much to spoil. I saw one post on X,
Hey,
which was
hey, hey,
basically
thank
somebody
you.
just saying, I feel lied to that there was a nudity toggle in the settings. And I think that that's fair. Like, these are not hot and steamy. Like, this is swampy and muggy as far as cutscenes and like romance scenes are concerned. It's just a straight fade to black for like all of them, and they're extremely underwhelming. And like, I'm not looking for Cyberpunk levels or even like Baldur's Gate 3 levels, but maybe like Witcher 3 level romance scenes or something. That would be fine. It's a fantasy RPG. Have some fun with it. Take out a unicorn and go crazy. But instead, it's like this was blocked by some Puritan, like Christian middle school theater director, and it's really bizarre. But I think it reflects a sentiment that's really frustrating to me and to a lot of other people, which is that it feels as though this game has been put together by a group of like kindergarten teachers or something. Like, it feels as though the people that made this game felt that the audience was like so young and naive that they needed to be like protected from harsh language or from people being mean to each other. So all of
it
the
looks like
dialogue
it made
between
for children.
companions or between Rook and even like the bad guys in the game comes off as, well, as long as what you think you're doing is right, good on ya. Rook, my entire family's dead. All my friends have been murdered and massacred in the streets. Well, we have each other now. That's good enough for me. No, you don't understand. Everyone I've ever known is dead and is dying and everything is terrible. That's really too bad. But as long as we focus on our friendships, we'll grow stronger and we can defeat Gillenane together. Who cares? Shut up. This is a serious moment. It's like always smirking and, well, let's look on the bright side. It's like, no, sometimes it's okay to not look on the bright side and instead be like, you know what? Nope, things are terrible. You know, JV had a really good post about this that I thought was so accurate. He said, as someone who does really like the new Dragon Age, the dialogue bugs me too, but not for silly cultural reasons like woke or DEI. It feels like it was written by folks who have gone to therapy, and that sort of self-care language has seeped into the dialogue. It's not constant, as some folks will suggest, but it's present when talking to companions, and that is not an insignificant amount of dialogue. Therapy language isn't necessarily a bad thing. I go to therapy, but at times it does not work for me here. Like, this is perfect. He says, as an example, let's take these problems one day at a time. That's all you can do. Look at the bright side of the situation. That's a win in my book. Let's focus on the real issues. We can't be fighting each other. You are enough. You don't need to prove anything. And they do this constantly. Like, there will be a dragon massacring a city, and they're like, well, as long as we have each other. Instead of being like, there's a goddamn dragon, everyone get it. You'd think that they'd be doing that, but no, they just like sit around crisscross applesauce singing kumbaya to each other while drinking kimchi. It drives me crazy, dude. Can you drink kimchi? I don't actually know. It's not a fit. I don't know.
Oh
But
god, he
now we
knows
have a
he does
guest
that
to share
insane,
her
dude.
thoughts. The queen of the house has arrived. My wife and babe, Nikki. I'm gonna swap seats. Jacob, transition. Here she is, the queen. The queen has arrived. Now, as I said previously, Nikki is like a diehard Dragon Age fan, old school. So, like, who really cares about my opinion with this? But Nikki, if anybody was rooting for this game to be tremendous, it was her. And I will just let her explain her Spark Notes thoughts, and then I'll poke and prod with some specific details after that. What do you think of Dragon Age Veilguard?
Well, first off, I woke up from a nap to be here. So, yeah. Like, it's like a 5.5, 6 out of 10. It's just the veilguard, honestly. It's not Dragon Age. That's my...
When you say it's not Dragon Age, what do you mean? What is Dragon Age, and then what is this?
Well, Dragon Age is an RPG. This is a very linear game where sometimes you can lose people. I guess no spoilers, but that's the most choice you get. And there's not even really a choice with that. It's either you fulfill their missions and their character arcs, or you don't and they die. I mean, so there's not... It's not an RPG. There are no choices. There are no stakes. There are no consequences. I won't say in past Dragon Age games you really could have been evil, but you could make choices that like a lot of your party didn't like, or the people didn't like, and it wasn't necessarily evil choice making, but you could be stern. The choices meant something.
Yeah, I think like there's this sentiment where like tonally, that's at least what I've said, like tonally the game feels very lighthearted in the dialogue, at least. Like they'll have moments where somebody dies on screen, or where like an entire city is destroyed, and that feels like it should be a big deal, but
that
because
again
the
look
tone
like-
is inconsistent, like right after that there will be a discussion where everybody goes off and has tea and starts talking about their fifis, and it just feels really dissonant, you know. It doesn't work super cleanly. Do you think that, well, let's try to be fair, what are things that you did like about it?
Initially, I think I really liked the first 6 hours. The first 6 hours felt like a tutorial, but it felt like it was really setting the game up to be something really cool, and it was really exciting. It was innovative. I got to see Solus, which was really cool, especially from playing Inquisition in previous games. You get Varric, you get Isabella really, really early in the game. You get to see Dorian. So you get all these like little callbacks to the past. And you're like, what are they going to do? This is fantastic. It's a little scary considering they only give you 4 questions in the beginning about previous games, when in the past you had the Dragon Age Keep, which stored all of your past information. This you get 4 questions, so you know a lot of your previous choices aren't going to have a lot to do with the story arc of the game, which in the past they did. Things would have changed in your current game state. But things I liked, a lot of people call the art style Pixar-y. I didn't... Pixar-y?
Yeah, it's like,
It's more like
I don't know what
Fortnite-y.
I would call it, but I understand if people don't like it, but I think as far as it's executed, it's done well.
They like Disney-fied it. It's like the big eyes, and it's not an eyesore for me. I don't hate it. I enjoyed it. I think as far as, this is silly, but as far as hair goes in a game, playing a character with long hair has never really been feasible, and they did that, and it looks really cool.
Oh, dude, I went back. I got footage of Dragon Age Inquisition. Jacob, put some up right here. The hair in that game is ungodly. Like, that game has aged quite poorly, but they did a great job technically with Veilguard, I think, in a lot of ways. It's just, you know, people say all the time with games, they're like, well, it's a new entry in the franchise, but it's not really the franchise. Like, Dragon Age Veilguard is not a Dragon Age game. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is not an Assassin's Creed game, whatever. But I think here it really is true, because at the core, Dragon Age is an RPG. And there's not really a role to play here.
Well, it's what they did is they completely swapped problems. In the past, this game was so loved, and all of its sequels have been so loved because they kept that initial thing where they said your choices matter. Your choices matter, your tone matters, and your relationship with your party matters. The one thing that was really, really rough in all those previous games was the combat. The combat's probably one of the worst models of combat that existed for a while there. I mean, it was uninteresting.
Real clunky.
It was very clunky. And there wasn't much you could do as far as a build. You could try, but it wasn't there. But they had the story building, they had the character arcs, and you could be the best Grey Warden, champion of Kirkwall, or Inquisitor that you could be. And in this, there were no choices. It was all handed to you. You felt like you got a choice depending on what you selected, but everything sounded the same. No matter what you did, you were this sarcastic rook, which there is no choice.
People gave it a lot of crap, and I think rightly so, because it has a lot of the same problems that like Fallout 4 had, where there's a dialogue wheel, but in Fallout 4 it's like you say yes positively, yes sarcastically, or you say no but give up and say yes. So they push you in the same direction every single time, but kind of try to trick you into thinking you're having a different conversation or you're making choices that are going in different directions. But in reality, you're just saying the same thing a slightly different way. And that at least happened for me a lot in Veilguard, where you're talking to characters and you want to like, there was one point where I think I was talking with Tash and something was said among the party and they just needed, like, I needed to step in and be like, everybody shut up. We need to focus. We're not talking about that now. Like, I wanted to just go full hard ass on it, but there was no choice. It was just like, you all are valuable for who you are. Let's stand together. You know, it was nothing that I actually wanted to say. And when I notice, like in RPGs, if there are multiple times where I feel the need to say something or perform some action, and the writers did not take that into account, something's gone wrong. Like if they didn't consider what I, a pretty normal player, want out of a situation.
I mean, most of the time it doesn't really matter because no matter what you choose, they will react the same. Maybe they will have one line of sentence as a response and then they do their own job, right? You can't just say, fuck you, I'm not going to be in the party, kick you out, and then kick someone out like that.
Then something
Yeah. You just don't have that kind of freedom in the RPGs at this point.
Account for that. They wanted you
But
to go down this
hopefully
very
in the
specific
future
path.
we
It's
might
very
have
specific.
one.
In all the
Yeah.
past games, you don't have to take the party they've laid out for you.
Yeah.
You can say no to almost anyone except for Solus and Varric and Inquisition. Otherwise, other than Alistair,
here you will
Morrigan,
be
and
friends.
Origins, you have to.
Yes.
You are set. You have to be friends with all of them. They've been set out. You really
Yeah.
can't continue the
Fucking
game
annoying.
until you've added all of them to your party.
I realize maybe it makes me
Yeah, otherwise you will get a middle finger and then your ending you get the bad ending. Game literally says, fuck you. You don't like my freaking woke character, you get the bad ending. You know? That's what the game is about.
sound like a real cynical
What
prick,
an annoying
but
piece
like,
of shit that
I
was.
want to be able to tell companions
I just got the bad ending and then quit the game. I don't want to play after that. Fuck that
I don't
bullshit.
like them, or like I don't want them to
I barely enjoyed the game in the first place, and then you want me to replay it so I can get the good ending? I'm like, nope.
travel with me.
You lost
Well,
me
that's-
there, but no.
Because like, we've used the example before, but like Baldur's Gate, I personally just don't really like Will. I just, it's just not interesting to me. So
You like being slapped around. He's too nice.
yeah, well,
He's too
I
nice.
love my Karlach and sassy Shadowheart. That's great. But I'll bring them, but I'll leave him behind, and I'll go through the game with those companions, and they don't try to force you into being buddy or best friends with
Anything else.
anybody.
They
It's
just
just
shut the fuck up and
pursue
then do
that.
their job.
Whereas here, it's like you are going to sit down, you will have tea, you're going to talk about your feelings together, and it feels really, really bizarre.
And it's incredibly PG. I think when you break down Dragon Age to its core, it was never intended for young audiences. It was a mature game. From the beginning, it's been a mature game where you make choices. Those choices have consequences, and they're big choices. The romances are mature. Everything is mature. It's not meant for a younger generation. It's meant for adults. And in this game, it really seems like they tried to appeal to a younger generation and make it playable by a younger generation. But by doing that, they removed everything that brought high stakes to the previous games. As far as
Yeah.
like production value and those sorts of things, I think they really raised the bar. But when it comes to
I
script,
think it's just that it has so much budget. They have so much money to throw at this game, but they fucked up with the story writing and then the voice acting. That's the most important part about this game. They fucked it up on both regards, which made the
dialogue,
game not even a game. Like you have to add a lock-on system, voice acting, story writing.
the characters they created.
That's the three freaking pillars of the game, right? To make the game fun game, more interesting game, engaging game, you could say. But those three pillars are not even in this game. Straight
I
up.
mean, going along with the mature content, in the past, they specifically made it so depending on your starting character, if you played an elf, a human, a dwarf in any of those past games, or an inquisition if you chose a kunari, it changed how the people in the world treated you. Whereas in this game, they might just refer to you differently. You can be like, yeah, our gods. And that's really what changes, is if you're dwarf or elf, you're talking about your specific gods. But in the past, I mean, in Origins, people were they treated human nobles and the elven servants completely differently. And your origins were completely different.
So basically, disrespecting in the source material. Got it.
I mean, I think part of what makes Dragon Age's lack of contrast between characters feel particularly like placid is another game that came out this year, which is Metaphor Refantasio.
Metaphor Refantasio. Get fucked! Everybody just says Metaphor Refantasio. They just meta the bitch out of that game. God damn. Everything in this game is good, dude. You have to play this game. Please play this game. It's a good game. You know? And here's the thing. This guy barely shows up. That's what I do have complaints about that game too. You can check my review. But I gave it a 9 out of 10. It's a good game.
Has
Great game,
a world
actually.
in which there's a lot of like disparity between classes, between races. Like if you are an Elda, you are treated like garbage by everybody, and you know they all talk down on you. They're like, who let you in it? You know, it's not kind at all. But that's what
You're
makes the world
basically
feel more
free.
real and legitimate and
If you're an
realized.
Elda.
And I think for Dragon Age, lacking any of that when they previously had it also makes it feel really just PG, very Disney.
Well, they
certified,
shot
that kind of thing.
themselves in the foot.
Yeah,
with it. Because in that,
DI.
when you selected your class and you selected your race in the very, very beginning, what you did is you set yourself up for a very
DI,
specific
very
type of game
DI.
and a very specific type of world state and how people treated you, who you could romance. And by doing that, they made replayability and the likeliness of replayability incredibly high. I have no desire to replay Veilguard because I know no matter what I do, I'm going to get the same outcome other than maybe 2 other endings that I don't want.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Pretty much.
I was really excited for it specifically because I did the romance with Solus and Inquisition. That was a major letdown, and I said, they're going to make up for it. They're going to make up for it. And they tried to with like 5 seconds, but I wouldn't replay the game for it at all. It makes me want to replay Inquisition, honestly.
Well, then you see other stuff like the really lackluster romances, or
I thought I missed it. I played every single quest. I 100%ed this game, and I thought I missed it.
yeah. And whenever you play a game and you put dozens and dozens and dozens of hours into it, and then you get to the end, you're like, wait, what? Something went terribly wrong, okay? Like some expectation was totally missed. And I don't know, I think, you know, the question was raised months ago where some people saw Dragon Age, and they asked the question in the context of like the art style and stuff, but I think it does follow here, which is just, who was this made for? Because it doesn't really feel like it was made for Dragon Age old school fans who really love the broader consequence and role playing that that franchise has been historically known for. But it's also not a particularly good action game. It's not a particularly good friendship simulator. Like, it just doesn't seem to do anything particularly well other than its presentation. And so you're just left wondering what can I root for? Because you're right, the first 6-7 hours are pretty cool, pretty epic, and I think do present it in a way where it's like, ooh, I like where this is going. But then it just changes, and it feels like a totally different game.
Well, you'll find a place, I'd say a third of the way through, where you have this massive fight, and you're like, the end of the world is coming. We need to sit back and talk about our feelings, and we just can't face the end of the world until we face our feelings. What?
Yeah, stupid.
What?
Well, they try to explain it in a way where they're like, well, we fight better when we're friends and when we know each other. So let's get to know each other, and then the friendship will power us through. And it's really
it's like it feels like it's written by a
as I've said
3-year-old.
repeatedly in this video, tonally, it feels totally out of place where people are dying and suffering, and then you're sitting around like going to dinner or drinking and sipping coffee together. It's just really weird. And I think they expect you to be able to turn your brain off to it, and not, like, it's again same thing Fallout 4 had, where your child's kidnapped, your wife or husband has been killed in front of you, so you want to go, if you're taking the story seriously, go and save them, find the person who kidnapped your child or whatever, and find your child. But you're expected to just kind of ignore it, turn your brain off, and just go play Legos and build a little fort for a few hours.
Can I be honest with you? I opened that game for the first time after having our first baby, and I played through that very first part where the kid gets taken and you watch your spouse get shot, and I shut it down right there. They took the baby and I was like, I'm done.
Nope.
I turned it off. I was like, nope, not my game.
Well, and again, it's like with games like this that are written this way, where they stumble out of the gate, if an RPG ever requires you to ignore the main story or ignore parts of it to take other parts seriously,
Yeah, it's a bad
something's
RPG,
gone wrong.
kinda.
Like something didn't work, because you should be able to engage with
I mean,
character.
Witcher 3 kind of does that, but the overlaying factor that you have to find the CD is always hanging over your head. You know, pretty much everything you do, one way or another, is after CD. But I don't like CD. You know, that's also an issue. That's just my personal issue. Could
Based
say.
side quests that maybe tie into the main story or
Yeah.
that help progress the main story or whatever. But instead, like with veilguard, you're just kind of expected to turn your brain off to what's going on. And same thing with Fallout 4 and these other games that have had similar problems. And it really just at the end of the day goes back to a problem with the writing.
It's
and
the storyboard.
yeah.
Inquisition did it really, really well. You don't know who your main enemy is until at least, I mean, if you play it through like 8 hours into the game, you have no idea. You know, I spent 8 hours of Inquisition in the tutorial and had no idea. I thought that was the game. I'm like, wow, this is a really kind of lame, shortish game. And then I realized I hadn't even gotten to Skyhold yet. I didn't even have like our singing moment in the tents and we're lost in the snow. I didn't have that. I played for 8 hours and then it was like Inquisition on the screen. I'm like, that was the tutorial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Horizon Forbidden
Yeah,
West
okay.
did the same thing where they like tried to continue the first game. So the first chunk of the second game is just in the same locations as the first game. So it just feels like there's multiple times where you're like, am I playing the right game? Did I boot up the right game right now? Like,
But it worked because
weird.
it taught you how to talk to people, how to figure, like it gave you the basis of
Yeah,
what
it's
the game
basically
is and how
a
to check
straight
in
out
and do
tutorial.
the
Makes sense,
quests
yeah.
without ruining the rest of the game. There was no, oh, but we're supposed to be fighting this major demon right now. The world's ending. You literally don't know what's happening. It's very cut, clear, and dry. You've woken up with this mark on your hand. You don't know what it does. And then after so much time, if you follow the main quest line, then it's revealed to you. It's not like, yep, the end of the world is coming. You just unleashed gods. The world is going to end.
yeah, this is the most serious thing that's ever happened in the history of ever.
But I can't fight because I have unresolved
But let's go talk
feelings.
about our feelings. Like,
Yep.
it's just, again,
Feeling simulator.
you are expected to ignore the seriousness of the situation in pursuit of tea parties and fifis, and it just doesn't land. And I know there's probably some people where they played it and they're like, finally a game
I
that
mean,
thinks
I
like,
can argue that they can't fight in their prime because they are just having a what do you call it? Not sure about themselves. I think it's a better way to phrase it. But you can argue like that. But it's just the way they portrayed it is the problem. Like they don't have confidence in themselves, so they couldn't fight effectively. Yeah, it does make sense, right? When you talk it like that. But the way the backstory they have and the way it landed and the way you have to deal with that is just the worst part about this game, you know? Like the concept is fine. They don't have confidence in themselves. So you are trying to uh, help them to find themselves so they can fight for you in a better way, right? It sounds cool, but they did it in such a bad way. Again, once again, metaphor refantasio, all the enemy, all the companions you face have one way or another problems, and then they are not have confidence in themselves. And then you as a main character help them and then cheer them on so they can go past that. And they did it in such a good way. It's the same concept, but this guy stuck when doing that same concept that metaphor fantasy did it in a 10 times better way. Every companion in that game, one way or another, have the exact same issue as this game has, but they did it in such a good way, you know, except for that priest girl. Fuck that priest girl.
I do. I want to ignore the real world or ignore my
Yeah.
problems and just do escapism, whatever. But this is like escapist entertainment within an escapist entertainment. Like they expect you to escape this reality by playing the game, and then to escape that reality by going to tea parties. And it just doesn't work for my brain. And it brings me back to the question, which is just, who was this made for? Because it sounds like most Dragon Age fans
It wasn't made for Dragon Age
are
fans.
bummed. Yeah.
It's the way they tried to appeal to Dragon Age fans is just doing callbacks and bringing back characters from previous games, but they didn't even do it very
That's what I
well.
mean.
I mean, the stuff with Dorian is so short. They gave him some cool facial hair. It's whatever. I mean, he pops in to say hello, so you're like, oh, you tried. And then Isabella was unexpected, which was cool, but even then, with the Lords of Fortune, it's meh.
Well, but we'll now enter spoiler
Oh, grand.
territory.
I've got so many.
Spoiler.
I'm all spoilers.
But let's just focus in as we wrap this up. Let's talk about the ending
Okay.
consequence, because that's kind of the name of the game with these titles. Do you think the endings were good or worth it?
Massive
Is
dog.
it worth experimenting with other stuff to get there?
No.
No.
I'm honestly, you saw me right after I ended it. I was fuming.
Yeah.
I've been mad for days. I ended it 2 days ago. I got the best possible ending, is what I'm assuming. I mean, I kept
Damn, even that made her
my
mad.
Inquisitor Romance with Solus from the previous game, and had so much hope, and was so let down. It was
Why
so
the hell you romance that bald
And
guy?
I will say, like, there's not...
He's a baldy
So,
asshole.
as you go through the game, it's based primarily on whether you completely leveled up each of the companions. When you do that, they get a special little badge, and they become, what do they call it? Like, Guards of the Veil or whatever?
Guardians of the Veil.
Almost like a veilguard. But they get that certification, and then that means that they'll basically survive in whatever you assign them to do in the ending. So the end of the game is not determined by individual choices that you're making throughout the main body of the game.
Yeah.
It's determined on
It just revolves around the bonding you
whether or
have with
not
your
you ground
companions.
out all the side missions for each individual companion.
Because Emmerich was right. They will not survive or make it to the end if they don't solve their own things first.
Yeah, if they don't get to know each
He
other.
says it outright.
Yeah.
He goes, if we don't solve our unresolved feelings, then there's no way we're going to make it to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like in an RPG, I love the idea that a few very careful choices can bypass a lot of grind or a lot of craziness. Like I like that you can persuade
Got
somebody
him.
in D&D and skip a big boss battle that you might have found where you need some really high level gear or abilities or whatever. Like I love that you have multiple tactics and options, but here you just have to grind through these quest lines and then you're good. Like they're gonna survive and you get the happily ever after ending.
Did you do the whole Crossroads stuff? The whole Crossroads quest line?
Yeah, so if you're, well, I mean, we can spoil, so.
Yeah, spoils.
Yeah.
I mean, so the Crossroad quest lines are not even necessary. You don't even have to go there unless you want this very specific good ending. Because the Inquisitor, even though in love with Solus, is not enough to convince him to not destroy the world. You have to trick him or betray him. Otherwise, you have to do all the Crossroads missions, which is never explained to you. There's no real reason to go there unless you want to fight really big boss demons randomly. And then go and solve the little puzzles in the little worlds. And that's the only way you can get the Spirit of Mythal.
Yeah, I think the Crossroads was at one time like the meeting hub for the multiplayer mode.
That's what it seems like.
I think, because I think it plays that way. But like, also, there's no really bad ending. Like you would think that there would be an ending where you screwed up. Now he wins, world ends, whatever.
I mean, Dragon Age has never really done that, though, because the idea is that you can carry on into the next game. So I understand why they didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's not Baldur's Gate.
But even then, like, it feels so out of place because, like, I tested an ending where, like, I got to the point where they prompt you, point of no return, here we go. And they tell you that so you can go and level up all the companions so you can get a good ending if
A good
you
ending or something,
you know,
right? Yeah.
desire that. But I tested multiple different endings, and the first one I tested was the one where nobody is leveled up, where nobody is maxed out, nobody is a
Yeah, that's the bad ending I
Guardian of
got.
the Veil, because I wanted to see like what is the worst possible ending, and everybody dies everybody, ends up screwed over.
Oh, so that little hall where they're like the corpses.
And you
you
weren't
wanna go
into-
see who's left. Yours was full of people.
Yeah, like everybody's
Mine was
dead
just a whole
except
bunch of blankets.
I brought like I think it was Lucanus and Tash for their like dragon whatever fire abilities that paired with my build well, and I brought them to the final boss fight. And then at the very end of the final boss fight, Solus just kind of turns him to stone with a little spell, and then you grab him, and then you both get sucked to the veil, and then like merge it together, and everything's fine.
You all did.
And then it's like, you all were heroes. Nobody survived, but they'll tell stories of your bravery. It's like, I don't think they should. I tried to do everything wrong possible, and I'm still like the wonderful hero that everybody loves. Like, that's, to me, when I think of an RPG, I want to be able to have really good endings, and I want to be able to do things that are not good. But in this game, the entire thing is that you are not playing your character, you are playing Rook, and Rook is like a smirky, smarmy, sarcastic therapist.
It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you
Yeah.
do. That's who they are. Well, and my other piece, that if it were truly a Dragon Age game, when it comes to the ending and when it comes to Harding versus Solus, if this were truly a Dragon Age game, there would have been a moment where you either have to say, no, we're going to spare Solus and try to save him, and you have to fight Harding, or Harding leaves you, or you side with Harding and you say, no, we got to finish Solus to avenge your dead gods that he tortured. But they didn't do that. Harding's just like, yeah, I guess it's okay.
Whatever
I have
you
all
say.
this pent-up anger, and I have the memories of these gods that he tortured and stole their life essence out of. But it's fine. I'll get over it. Whatever you say.
Yeah.
If it were a true Dragon Age game, that wouldn't be the case. You would have to side with one of them.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of the choices.
Well, and the meme we've been joking about with our friends, because we have some friends that are playing through the game now as well. And the whole joke is like, they have those little pop-ups where it's Harding approves of that or likes that or whatever it is. And, Nev greatly
Oh, that actually
disapproves
is
or
so
whatever.
weird.
But it doesn't really do anything. All
It
it does
means
is it
nothing.
changes that meter where you're going to have to grind a little bit more, whatever it is, rank, or I forget the term they use, but you have to grind more of that rank by doing more side quests and combat with them to make up for that.
Means
So you
nothing.
could do something like horribly offensive to them, like destroying their city. And as long as you take them on a couple more side quests, they'll get over it, because it's just that little meter in the character screen that tells you what your bond is. That's it, bond.
Well, it doesn't
And
matter.
it's so stupid. Like, it's really frustrating. Like, if I chose to let Treviso get destroyed, if I chose to let that go and save Nev's place, I think should probably cut off Lucanus. Like, he's pissed off about it. He's
He
upset.
should leave you.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be that they're hardened. It means that you've completely betrayed them.
Because all that hardened means is that now the multiplier by which you scale them up and level them up when bringing them on side quests, it's just lessened,
And they can't heal you.
and they can't heal you. And it eventually like goes away, and it's like, oh well, I got over it. It's so stupid. Like,
It never went away for me.
I didn't,
it stayed.
maybe it stayed. I didn't do a lot of testing with
She just couldn't heal. for the whole
Lucanus.
thing.
I stuck with Nev, so I
See,
didn't
I
use
did
Lucanus a ton.
I saved.
Not at least
Treviso.
not a lot of healing abilities.
They also took
yeah.
all the fun out of the crows. I mean, the intrigue, it's just,
Yeah,
and the
it's
perfect time to bring Zevran back. Like, come on, whatever. No, I'm
Wait,
not.
Jake
I'm
Wall,
so
Mike,
done. I'm
Pete
so
and Mike
mad.
Tyson?
yes.
Goddamn.
mad.
It's just, I think, as you said, it's not a Dragon Age game. It wasn't really made for Dragon Age fans. It wasn't made for more typical like action adventure or
Somebody honestly
fans.
just played God of War, and they're like, that's what I want,
yeah, but
and then did it wrong.
did it poorly.
They're like, let me catch something out of a chest. Yeah. Let me ride on a boat in a place that isn't important to the entire quest line. Yeah, that's the way.
Yeah. If anything, it shows why God of War is so impressive, because they copied a lot of the same formula for this, but I think the way that they structured it and set it up really demonstrates a misunderstanding of why it worked in God of War, which is how we ended up with this. But I mean, overall, I think we're both quite disappointed with it and frustrated with how it turned out. I feel, as I said at the very opening of this video, I feel somewhat misled, because I feel like the marketing, the previews, everything framed this as a like an epic fantasy RPG. And while there's epic moments and it's certainly fantasy, it doesn't feel like an RPG
Ooh,
at
Weiss
all.
hopped? So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Does anything really matter?
Nope.
No.
All the big stuff happens off screen where like, yes, my city's destroyed by the blight.
Fade to black.
Fade to black. Or you leave the governor behind and he dies. Or you save him.
Doesn't matter.
Never seen
Any
him.
other previous game, he would have come back. Something would have happened as a result of that.
Yeah.
No, nothing happens. Romances? Yeah. Let's do something. Fade to black.
Yeah. Like, again, maybe I'm just thirsty, but like I expected some steam, but no.
Well, it's Baldur's Gate did it right. Baldur's Gate Tav doesn't even talk. And they still did it better. Which is, I don't know.
Yeah, do you think, to wrap this up, do you think at the end of the day, Baldur's Gate has just spoiled us, or
It's the
if
complete...
this
No, I
came
don't
out
think
2
so.
years ago,
Here's
would
the
your opinion
thing,
be different?
Baldur's Gate got me really excited for what Dragon Age Veilguard could have been. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I think Baldur's Gate is a brilliant game. I've played it many, many times and put a lot of hours into it, and I most likely will continue to do so. I wish that Dragon Age could have been on the same scale.
And maybe, you know, if this did well enough to get Mass Effect 4, whatever they end up calling it, greenlit, maybe then we will see BioWare continue to like come back. Honestly, given Andromeda and then Anthem, I do think this is a huge step up. I just
absolutely.
don't think it's
The right step.
still great. Yeah, I think they probably shuffled when they should have stepped or left.
They
Yeah.
needed to keep the things that worked and revamp the things that didn't. And it's like they just scrapped it all and improved the things that weren't working in the past, but forgot the things that worked.
Yeah.
And that made the game so popular and so liked. I mean, it's what got me into video games in general. Because I wasn't really good at click shooters or anything like that. It was the role playing that made it interesting.
And you know how she wasn't, you can know that she wasn't good at that? Because she just
I
called
called
them
it a
click
click shooter.
shooters. I love me a good old click
a
shooter.
little point and clicky, not my thing.
That's so funny.
The
We're
fate
gonna
of the
call
world.
that now, from now on, click shooters. Call of Duty, the world famous click shooter.
No.
But here we are at the end of all of that. I just think it is a game that was not really made for anybody in particular. It's frustrating, and I only have one other bit that I wanted to talk about, which is the
Yep,
goddamn
it sucks.
zits. What is it about modern games being obsessed with zits? Like in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it was all about these glowing purple zits that you would pop to deal massive damage to certain outposts or cannons or whatever. And then in this game, it's just gigantic glowing red zits that you pop, and then the veins that
What
connect
the hell is
them
a zit?
light up another zit that you have to pop. And all throughout the game, these things are used to like soft gate you between individual areas and slow you down as you explore stuff. And it's explained away as like, oh, it's the blight spreading, but it just is stupid. Like, come on. It got so old after the first 10 minutes. Then we had to keep doing it for the next 30, 40, 50 hours. Again, it feels very Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League-esque in its presentation, and that's why it's all the funnier
I mean,
that
they literally, I
it
think
was
they
at
put
one
it off
time a
from that
multiplayer
game.
because in another universe where this was not turned into a single player game, this game would launch as in
Probably
like, a
as a
Dragon
good
Age
game.
4-player multiplayer game with like looter shooter mechanics, but it's like looter magic spell user mechanics where you're popping these red zits, and then Suicide Squad was a looter shooter popping purple zits. Like in an alternative timeline, this game probably would have ended up feeling much closer to that, which is kind of funny, but here we are. I mean, just to wrap up all of this, it's a disappointing game. I don't know if I would go so far as to say it's downright bad. I think if you go into it expecting like a friendship simulator, it probably is that 9 out of 10 game for you. It probably is, like a lot of game journalists said it was. But if you're going into this expecting like a dark and gritty RPG, or if you're going into this expecting an RPG period, I think you're going to be really, really disappointed. And hearing my wife, who is a diehard Dragon Age fan, also express frustration over the design choices kind of solidifies this in my mind, that it was not really designed for people like her. And I know it was not really designed for people like me. And so while I'm sure some people out there will love it, I don't know who they are. And I hope they're having a good time with it. But I also transparently, I don't know if there's enough of them to make this financially
success.
viable
Yeah.
at the end of the day. But maybe it is. Time will
Probably
tell. I
not.
guess we'll have to keep an eye on EA and what they say about its performance. There's been some debate over whether it's profitable or not. I don't think it's profitable at this point. I think it's going to take a long time. But whether it was successful enough to justify BioWare remaining open, that does remain to be seen. Because while the numbers weren't Suicide Squad levels of bad, it definitely was not where they would hope it would be with like a smash success. It kind of came in with a little bloop instead of a big splash. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. But I'm going to leave it there. I shouldn't have been talking this long because I have a really bad ear infection. So thanks for watching. I love you all dearly. Thank you again to my lovely, wonderful wife, my flame, my muse, for helping me on this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
All right. Good video.